This is Tony Hendrick with Painting Spirit. And yesterday I talked about perception, and today I think we're going to talk about perception in a more refined way and more specifically talk about subtlety. And with subtlety, what I'm going to refer to is not so much the subtlety, paying attention to subtlety in your art, but the subtlety of your perception and the subtlety of the energies going on continually. The subtle, I guess I'm specifically talking about the subtle perceptions that are continually happening for you. And that's something you become aware of when you stop thinking. When I first started doing these painting meditations, I did them without talking. And one of the reasons was because I didn't know how I could do that. Had my own anxieties about talking while painting. But the other aspect to why I wanted to do that is because I know that being in your mind is not necessarily the best way to become aware of what's actually happening. Because the mind tends to talk loudly, where your heart, your emotions, well, I shouldn't say the emotions, because the emotions can be quite loud too. But your heart kind of whispers. And one of the things with the mind is it thinks it knows and thinks it's in control, and there's all kinds of things happening without the mind controlling it. I guess if you think about the heart, your heart's beating right now, and it's doing a wonderful job of keeping you alive. And I'm sure you didn't have to think about how that was going to happen. So these subtle energies in your body, subtle energies of perception, are happening all the time. And one of the things that the mind does is it can be pretty crude. So right now, I am painting a landscape with a pine tree. And if I were to listen to my mind, I might think of pine tree, Christmas tree, and I might think of, something not quite very subtle. Pine tree, well, that's a rectangle. And I'm not going to actually see what's happening. Where when you start to pay attention to subtle feedback that is available to you, things look differently. And what I think of specifically with that idea is when I first was learning to, can't say that was when I was first learning to draw, because all of us were probably drawing quite young, but this was in high school. I was introduced to a book called Drawing on the Right Side of the Brain, and this person had tools for getting you out of that tendency of the mind to label, like the pine tree that I grew there is a rectangle. One of the techniques that she would suggest is, let's say you're looking at a photograph or something, turning that photograph upside down can get you out of the mind's tendency to label, and then you might start to see what's actually there. And those things might be shadows, which I'm doing right now, and color that you might not otherwise see. Because my mind's not necessarily telling me that this is a shadow right now, I'm just looking. And then that gets me into another idea too I have about this that has to do with practice. Subtlety is something that's actually quite powerful, and it sounds different than that to us. Subtlety, it's, that's not something that's powerful, but my guess is that you get a great movie or a great painting, and people can talk about it for years and years, sometimes centuries. And the reason they can talk about it is because there's all kinds of subtlety happening. And that subtlety didn't come about from, well, it can come from the mind, but it's coming from a flow that happens. Whether you're doing it with your mind, writing great literature. It's basically, I think, connecting to subtle energies. And in doing that, all kinds of things just come together. And so thinking about practicing, I think one of the things with practicing that happens is, you watch Michael Jordan. I don't really watch basketball, so I'm not sure why I'm using him as an example. I guess it's just because he's such a easy example, but I'm sure he put in hours and hours, and I think I've heard before that he would be in the gym longer than anybody else practicing. And my guess is what the practicing ends up doing is it allows him, when he's in the game, to no longer have to rely on the mind because he's trained his body to respond in automatic ways. That now he can just be in that flow state. And I think that's the real reason for practice. It's just allowing yourself to get into that flow state. And that's one of the reasons why, recreating a great work of art, maybe you got an artist who created a masterpiece and they can never quite get back to it. If they get recognition for it, because in that recognition that might get them caught up back into the mind, thinking about what they're going to create next. I think about, when I think about that, I think about Peter Jackson in the Lord of the Rings, the trilogy, in my mind anyway. Those movies are a masterpiece. And then when you watch The Hobbit, it's a completely different pictures of what happened. I don't know, it could be he was just in a different way of receiving. It's kind of a different painting today. I'm just playing and having fun. Gentle landscape. You know, subtlety also is different than detail, which I'm kind of doing right now. It's not the same. So I've gotten very obsessed with detail before, and I'm actually coming from a place of control, needing it to be a certain way, and that's different than subtlety, because again, what I'm referring to with subtlety is paying attention to the energies that are going on that we're not necessarily aware of. Think about when I was a child, going outside after the rain, and everything is kind of new when you're a child. You can kind of have that same experience going on vacation. You become aware of things that you otherwise aren't paying attention to when you're on vacation. As a child going outside after a rain, I can remember the smell of the worms. Little subtle details like that you just automatically are aware of when you're a child. You're not really forcing yourself to pay attention to that. And a lot of times, as adults, we got to remind ourselves, get ourselves out of the mind, pay attention to those kinds of things in life, taking time to smell the roses. So the reason I chose a landscape today is because I wasn't quite sure how I was going to talk about subtlety. So I thought having a landscape where I'm just observing and having fun with looking at something and painting, it's an easy way for me to kind of zone out. For you, you're going to have your own unique way of entering into those subtle energies. There'll be things that you'll be aware of that I have no idea about. And it's your job to introduce me to those subtle energies in your special way when you're creating your art. So, you heard the bell. I think I'm going to leave this where it's at. It's a little bit of a different painting. Maybe I'll play a little bit, see if I can get the thing to pop some. Maybe something, just one little thing like that can make a big difference to the painting. Maybe another little color somewhere. Not much, just enough. I don't want to overdo it. Okay, we'll see you tomorrow.